Aye.
Short Bus Debate Club. It's a bus rolling.
I can get on board. Hello, I'm Darren Jolly.
It's time to get this short bus started. So let's roll and on with the show. That's Darren Jolly on guitar. This is Brian Courtney with Short Bus Debate Club, and today we are talking about guitarists.
Not me, though, for damn sure.
To some degree, and I know I say that a lot. I got to quit doing that. I think that's a crutch word.
That's right, I say and at this point in time a lot, so.
Apparently I do too. So we're talking about guitar heroes, just guitar players, people that make music what it is today and has been historically, and just, I don't know, people that inspire us, I guess.
Yeah, music's a good thing. It's a good thing for your soul, okay? Yeah, guitar, it's funny, I grew up like any other kid. When I saw a guitar, heard guitar, I just wanted to be a guitar player. Of course, I tried and I sucked at it, but that doesn't mean that I don't absolutely love and appreciate a lot of different musical spaces out in the ether.
Yeah, I gotcha. So, I think this argument happens a lot where people say, well, who are your favorite guitarists? And I don't know, maybe it's the circles that I've run in, or the type of music that I listen to, which that isn't even really fair because I have a fairly eclectic music taste. Nobody can really identify what I listen to based on looking at my MP3 player. But, if that question comes up in these circles that I happen to be in, Jimi Hendrix is always there, and rightfully so. He was brilliant, especially for the time that we're talking about. I mean, because he was born in what, 43?
I think that's about right.
So he definitely laid the groundwork for innovation as far as playing guitar goes. Another couple of guys that are in those.
42. You're good, close. Yeah.
Eddie, well, that's even younger. So that means, or that's even older. So that goes for the innovation even more, as far as I'm concerned. Eddie Van Halen was always in that argument.
I don't love Eddie Van Halen. Technically, the dude was super sound. Dude, Eruption was one of the cool. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I heard that song the first time. All that weird hammer and shit that he was doing on it. I loved it. But he was stubborn. He didn't want to. I think if you're going to be good, it's like if you have a natural talent at something. Like, do you just stop at that natural talent, or do you find other people that?
Well, he did some other different stuff. I mean, I know that concert that we went to, the For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge tour, that song,
Alice in Chains opened up that show.
I know that, and they got booed off stage. It cracks me up that they got booed off stage, because then they ended up being brilliant, and then Lane Staley ended up dying, and they were no longer brilliant, and whatever.
Jerry Cantrell still wandering around.
Yeah. But he did that song Pound Cake, where he actually took a drill and ran it on the guitar. Now, whether or not that's innovative, I don't know. What's his name from ZZ Top? He used to play with a quarter as his pick. Well, that's John Lee Hooker. The how.
Well, he did it in. They did it in.
Outside LaGrange.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the one.
But what's Billy Gibson? Yeah. He played with a quarter because he thought that it gave him a real unique sound. And it did. From listening to other people play guitar. So
William Frederick Gibbons.
the drill thing, yeah, that might have been a stretch. It might have been a gimmick.
Well,
I dug that song though.
No, dude, and I don't want to pound on the guy, because I just think like he was really resistant to like learning anything about music theory. And when I go into my weird spaces, the people that I get like most excited about or interested in, and this is like not on the history side because you're kind of starting on the history side when you start with Jimmy or you bring up Chuck Berry or something like that, but like say for instance, there's Humphreys McGee is a band that I listen to a fair amount. Jake Sininger, that dude like is like the jazz modes and like I don't know because I don't know the technicalities of mixolydians and all these various different things. It just seemed like, and I think Eddie Van Halen, like a lot of his stuff, he learned by ear. Like he I don't think that at least from what I heard.
So you think Eddie's a parrot, like I think Eric is a parrot, Clapton?
No. What do you?
Or a mimic?
You're gonna have to.
So okay, and I shouldn't say this because Eric Clapton did a lot of brilliant shit in his younger days when he did drugs. I think when he got off of drugs, his brilliant shit kind of left him. And he just started. Eric Clapton at some point reminded me of, what's his name? Oh, I get by with a little help. Joe Cocker.
Joe Cocker.
Yeah. Where he was no longer innovating and improvising. He was just copying other people's shit. And I think Eric Clapton kind of got into that mode later on in life. I don't want to say it ended when drugs ended, but if you look at Eric Clapton with Cream and Derek and the Dominoes.
Did he write Layla?
That was a different Derek, or that was a different Eric than Eric Clapton now.
Did he write Layla? Do you know?
I think that was one of those that was written by all of them. Name, produced by so and so.
The only reason why I asked that, like the parrot thing, I get like a former boss of ours when we worked. I will not mention any names, but when we worked at the old music store, I remember he would always say about Eric Clapton, just shut up and play, because like the only reason why I don't think of him as parroting anything is that like if I hear his tone, I always know it's him. Like there are certain like tones on a guitar player. Like if you hear David Gilmour, he has a very specific tone and style, the way that he bends inside of those spaces. But I do think that it legitimately, because I don't think that like the last half of his life he's written, Tears in Heaven. I mean, that's like not, it's not Layla. That's for damn sure.
Right.
Or
right.
anything that he was playing in the. But most of the stuff I guess I like from him is stuff that other people had written, other blues things that he's. But it's still his. There's no doubt that when he puts his stamp on it, like the way that Jimmy did with All Along the Watchtower, that was Bob Dylan's song, but Jimmy put a stamp on it like nobody ever did before.
So. Well, and you said something interesting though, because you said Eric Clapton and the blues, and Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones, and Derek and the Dominoes and those guys, they were in England, mm-hmm. and all of those guys loved the blues and copied it. I mean, the Rolling Stones, even the Beatles, they were doing covers of blues songs before they ever got famous. And then the Stones still did. And Led Zeppelin ended up being sued by probably every blues player out there because of the fact that they ripped them off.
The stuff on the first album especially, yeah. He did write it. He wrote it with Jim Gordon. It says Eric Clapton and Jim Gordon wrote Layla. I'm sure he didn't write the piano part. That fucking piano part at the end is just insane. But
Layla,
sorry,
you got me on my knees. Anyway, I thought it was interesting that you said that because obviously, he did his thing with B.B. King for a while, and so he was definitely influenced by the blues, but Jimmy Page, who he's not one of them that I would have ever considered one of the greatest guitar players ever. He was a good guitar player, and I loved Led Zeppelin. hate Stairway to Heaven with all of my fucking heart, but I love Led Zeppelin. But Jimmy Page isn't one of those guys that I would have considered one of the greats. But there was this movie, I think it was called It Had to Be Loud, or It Was Really Loud, or something. It was a documentary. And whoever did the documentary said he got 3 of the greatest guitar players ever. And it was Jimmy Page, The Edge from U2, and Jack White. Now, Jack White is a good fucking guitarist. Better, in my opinion, than Jimmy Page. And The Edge, I would have never called him a great guitar player ever.
He creates great tones. I agree. I like his stuff is not. It just tones. It's again like there's a signature that he has on his, but he's yeah.
Well, especially after watching that movie, because he was, as far as I'm concerned, cheating. He was DJing, because he'd say, he'd strum something and then he'd throw it through a mixing board and he'd stretch it and reverb it and do whatever. And to me, that's not playing guitar.
So, like, for instance, on the Joshua Tree, right? Like, if you go back and listen to Where the Streets Have No Name at the beginning, where the intro, dun, 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 that's just and it's catchy. It's good on the ear. It's like musically sexy, but it's just because of the way that he put the delay and the reverb on it. It's not, there's like a bouncing sound with the way that the strum connects to the, and that is, yes, that's not a technician. Like the Jimmy Page thing, I think is an interest, because I think that he is one of the best writers of all time, but he is a terrible technician. Like it had to been difficult, like sitting next to the Yardbirds, when you got fucking Jeff Beck on one side, who is definitely one of the best guitar players of all time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just crazy. Sometimes you listen to him and you're like, dude, what the fuck's going on in your head? But who else?
Well, Eric Clapton was there.
The yeah. So you're stuck between Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck. And again, like Jimmy Page, when he quit, drinking it, I remember he was puking on himself at Live Aid one year. I mean, you do better for yourself, unless you only Keith Richards can. But again, there's another one. Like, I like Keith Richards as a player and a writer, but he is not the greatest guitar player of all time, not by any stretch of the imagination.
But and I don't want to circle too much off of the guitar thing, but the Rolling Stones, I like a lot. I can never say that I loved them. And, that's another argument, Beatles or Stones. And I got to go Beatles every time. If I could only have one of them, it's going to be the Beatles. And it's not because of me not liking the Stones. It's just because, in my opinion, the Beatles are so much better.
I love the Beatles songwriting too. The Beatles songwriting was just so unique. George Harrison was just a really cool, like, quiet in the background. I mean, yeah, dude, I'm actually right there with you on the Beatles. But the Stones they're great performers. I mean, it's amazing to think that they still. I mean, they're all like 80, north of 80 now, and they're still all jamming out, like, which is just.
Yeah, it is crazy. But really, all of those bands, I mean, are really fucking old. And Kraftwerk came to Red Rocks earlier this year, and those guys have been around since the late 60s.
Who's Kraft? I don't even know.
Kraftwerk is basically, and again, we're kind of spiraling, but they were one of the first, what I would consider electronica type bands.
Weird.
And
they were doing it through analog stuff, though.
Yeah, back in the 60s.
Weird. So who's your top 5 then? If you got to pick top 5 guitar players, then.
See, I don't know, and that's one of those things, I think, like books or movies, where it's kind of like the mood that you're in, right? But so Jeff Beck is definitely on there. Prince is definitely on there.
An awesome guitar player.
I fucking love Tom Morello. I think that he can play different types of music, and he's played some Jimmy stuff where it could have been Jimmy, and that's kind of the thing. Like, if you're gonna do a cover, in my opinion, you've got to either nail it to where you don't know it's a fucking cover, or you've got to spin it to where it's yours.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're not just trying to kind of sound like
This is
them,
not karaoke,
right?
Yeah. Or guitar karaoke would be the same thing as karaoke at that point in time.
And, you know, Tom Morello was with Rage, and he was with Audio Slave. He did that band, what the fuck were they called? Rage in Cleveland, I think, or something, where he was with Chuck D.
Really?
So he's got some different levels to him. So I think Tom Morello would be there because he's got that improvisation thing as well as the technician thing.
I think he's unique, but I think that he gets super dependent on the effects a lot as well.
So. He likes to bend notes, but I don't know if I don't think he does like what the Edge does and throw them through a mixer.
Yeah.
He might. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so that's 3. What
I don't know, dude. See, I do like Jack White a lot. I always loved Eddie Van Halen, but then I've got Gary Clark Jr. is fucking brilliant, man. He's awesome, and he played with definitely Jimmy Vaughn when he was 12 years old because he was raised in Austin, so he was always hanging out in 2nd Street. So he played with Jimmy Vaughn, and I'm pretty sure he played with Stevie before Stevie Ray Vaughan died. But I don't know. That's tough.
5 is impossible. I mean, that's why I give you such an impossible number to. I mean, there's a million names that you haven't Obviously, I'm a jam band guy, right? I mean, you've known me for a long, but
yeah.
I would never put Jerry Garcia as greatest guitar player of all time. He created space, and they sort of all kind of wander around in those same areas. But if I put him up against somebody like Trey, particularly Trey in the '90s, dude, Trey Anastasio, his chops are just, and the way that he would create live, and again, when you're talking about best guitar players, so there's studio stuff and there's live stuff. I mean, sometimes people just do incredible things in the studio. I don't listen to Fish's studio albums. I listen to their live stuff, like Jake Sininger, they will cover Pink Floyd in a way that goes in their own direction, but respects the spirit of the thing and then they do their own thing where they had this song called Ringo I was listening to the other day that was 1 hour and 2 minutes, and I mean, it was just really, there were 3 parts of the song, maybe 12 minutes that actually had lyrics and stuff, but the other, 50 minutes was them. And they had, I think there were some people in town that came, the keyboardist Kevin, or Kyle Hollinsworth, keyboard for String Cheese Incident, came and sat down for about 15 minutes and then walked off stage. They had another guitar player come out and walk off stage. They were just people that were coming and going and jamming in this hour and 2 minute song. And I don't know, he's another one worth listening to that people are probably not very familiar with.
Well, I mean, if you want to talk about people that the audience isn't familiar with, then I think we do need to mention Steve Cropper. And I don't know that he necessarily goes on my top 5.
Who's Cropper?
So Steve Cropper was part of Booker T and the MGs. Okay. He was the guitar. And Booker T and the MGs were the studio band for Stax Records in, I know it was Tennessee. I want to say Nashville, but it might have been Memphis.
He's an old man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Stax Records has been out of business since the 80s. So, but he was an unknown, and he played with and for so many people because he worked for Stax Records.
Studio musicians, that's such a different, but because you got to be able to sit down and you got to be able to play whatever. You got to go through, you can go through half of it and you know where it's going essentially because you understand that. And that's when I think about Eddie Van Halen, raw talent, but somebody like Cropper, he he understood enough about music theory. If you're a studio musician like that, you understand enough about to where you time signature changes, key changes, relative minors.
Well, and so maybe Booker T and the MGs and the Funk Brothers are not good examples of studios because in those particular studios, they had a certain type of music, right? So the Funk Brothers were the studio musicians for Motown.
Yeah.
And obviously Booker T and the MGs was Stax Records. So Stax and Motown were mostly black musicians, and they had a tendency to do a certain type of music. Call it R&B, call it Motown. So maybe those guys didn't have to branch out as much.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the guys down at Muscle Shoals that they called the Swampers and the Wrecking Crew in LA,
pick a song or two.
They played with a lot of different people, so they had a wider range of stuff because it was rock and it was R&B and it was blues, and I don't think they did any punk rock, but it was country. It was, it was this broad spectrum of genres that I think maybe based on what you're saying, there's that raw talent, but then they can do all of these different things.
Yeah, you're pulling this front person in, and we're going to just fill up these spaces.
Right. So maybe the Wrecking Crew and the Swampers are a better example of that than Booker T and the Funk Brothers. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know anything about studio musicians specifically, but I do know that if you're going to sit down and do it, there's a goofy guy I listen to on YouTube all the time, named Rick Beato, and he always talks about, this guy did studio stuff for that group of people, and because you have to sit down there and you have to literally just hear it and then boom, be on your way, because that's your profession at that point in time. That's what you which is weird to think about, because music, well, there's a structure to it. Like the feel is as important as the structure is. Like you can't just, it's not like 2 + 2 = 4.
Well, and I would imagine that it really, not that Jim Morrison, when he went into the studio in LA, not that he used the studio band, but if he did, Jim Morrison would be significantly different than, say, George Harrison or Aretha Franklin or anybody else. And not because of the genre, but because of the personality, right? He was the Lizard King, and he just, let's play and see how it feels. Where somebody else might have said, okay, no, we need this structure and this. I'll give you a little bit of leeway here, maybe, but not really. You got to keep it tight.
That had to have been frustrating. I mean, because he was so out of it, and your image of him as that like ultimate feeling, kind of like vibes, man. Right on, Robbie.
But that's what I was saying, is that being a studio musician, you've got to work with all of those people and know your audience. And at that point, the person that hired you is your audience. So you got to try and understand what they want as fast as possible.
I could never, like, when it comes to best musicians, your point earlier about what mood, and feeling, like, I will forget about somebody that I haven't listened to for 18 months, and then I'll just have to like listen to it. Everything in music is about mood when it comes down to, which is why when people get stuck in certain spaces, rigid spaces, when it comes to music, like I need a different guitar player for every day of the year. Like sometimes I want to listen to Billy Strings. You heard about this guy at all?
Mm-mm.
He's sort of a newgrass bluegrass guy. Took a lot of influence from Doc Watson and other important old Old Picker, Tony Rice, all that bluegrass scene. But he brought all these weird. He loved the Dead. He loved heavy metal-ish kind of stuff. Like he'll do weird covers sometimes, but he does them in the context of bluegrass. But it's not straight bluegrass. It's like jam band kind of. This is a kid you got to check out. You got
Billy
Billy
Strings.
Strings. Yeah, he's and the people that he sits in with all the time. They're all. It's interesting. Like String Cheese Incident. They were a part of the jam band thing, but they had that big bluegrass sort of like with Bill Nurshi and uh, Michael Kang and all those guys. That big influence and a lot of and Leftover Salmon, of course. There'd been a huge revival of weird, incredible bluegrass players that are not just and of course like you purists, right? Sometimes when it comes to music, if you're not following the letter of the law, but you I mean, it's like when Bob Dylan was playing at the Newport Festival, and the first year that he played it, he did, and it's acoustic and blah blah blah, and everybody and blah blah blah, and everybody's like, oh, this feels good, yeah, hippies, we're all chic and we're in the, and then the next year he comes in and he plugs in, and like people were acting like he put a gun to their head and blew their fucking brains out, like.
I think that the music industry has changed. It's still a lot about marketing. And so maybe that's why I never heard of Billy Strings because, bluegrass isn't one of those things that they try to push down your throat. There's not a strictly bluegrass station. You know what I mean? You really, there's not even at most record stores, if you can find a record store anymore.
Yeah, I don't think my daughter knows what a record store is.
You can't find a bluegrass section. I mean, it would be country bluegrass or something along those lines, maybe. But nothing. There wouldn't be an entire section of bluegrass, is what I'm saying. So
it would be in with the country stuff, like you say, yeah.
so it's funny though because, and again, I know I keep swinging off topic, but now I'm just thinking of really good musicians, and you talked about the letter of the law with regard to music, and Nashville apparently is a horrible place because what they do is they want to produce songs that are singable by someone, right? So Nashville hires two types of people. They hire singers and they hire songwriters, but they don't hire both. And so Willie Nelson went to Nashville and struggled and struggled and struggled because he wasn't following that letter of the law. He wanted to do both.
Yeah, it's the same thing that happened to Steve Earle when he came to Nashville.
Steve Earle is another guy. Yeah, and he could play guitar. Yeah. So, but then I know Willie went back to Austin, or went to Austin, I should say, and that's where he ended up succeeding.
Mm-hmm.
Where did Steve Earle go?
He went down to Nashville. They cut an album, and then he started to do heroin a ton, and then he cut Copperhead Road, I think, which was just all angsty as all get out.
But he didn't stay in Nashville.
He was around. I think he was in and out of that area. I don't think he totally ever left. But there's no doubt that what you're saying is true. They brought him in there. He was supposed to be the next face. Like they wanted him to be the face of. And he said, no, I'm going to do what I do. And he butted up against it, which I think by his own account is probably why he ended up partying so hard and, having heroin needles hanging out of his eyeballs and stuff.
I don't know. All of those guys in Nashville, regardless of whether you were a success or if you were just struggling, from what I've seen and heard on documentaries and stuff, those guys partied hard, and everybody thinks, rock music, hard drinkers, drugs, whatever. Those country music people didn't fuck around. They loved heroin and speed and fucking downers and weed and,
I just
of
meant that he
course,
was doing that because
booze.
he was buttoned. That was what the way that he was able to buck up against it. Like when he's like, "Fuck you," I'm gonna do, "Fuck you, I'll do what you tell me,"
Right, right. Yeah.
Steve Earle's a funny guy.
I love that one song that he sings, and I have no idea what the name of it is. But it's been in a couple of movies. It was on The Wire.
Sing it for us, Brian.
No, that shit ain't gonna happen. I think I've got it on here.
Did I say Derek Trucks earlier? Derek Trucks is awesome, dude.
No, so who, like, if you ask me my top 5, what are your top 5 if you had them?
If I have to narrow it down, I have no idea how to negotiate that question. I really like Derek Trucks right now, though. I mean, that guy like plays a slide like nobody that I've ever heard. Like I still love Fish, but I preferred older Fish. I still listen to everything, but it still would probably have to be Fish. I don't know, dude. I mean, it all depends on. It really does depend. Joe Stevie Ray Vaughan sometimes. Uh, there's a band, Paco de Lucia. There's an album called Friday Night in San Francisco. It's Al Di Meola, John McLaughlin, and Paco de Lucia. De Lucia. I don't know how to say it right, but I'd take any one of those three. Al Di Meola, he gets really heavy jazzy sometimes. He's got a really cool version of Norwegian Wood on YouTube that's definitely worth listening to right now. You said the thing about radio stations, like I can't, or channels, or even if it's Sirius, or like I just go like I listen to so much on YouTube where it just feeds all these different spaces. Like that's I just Marcus King is a good up and Warren Haynes, dude, is fucking awesome. I love fucking Warren Haynes. Like I was there's this version of Melissa. Warren Haynes obviously played with the Allman Brothers for a long time, and then of course now plays with Government Mule. But um, there's a version of not Soulshine. What the hell am I thinking of? I'm losing track of my brain. Warren Haynes. Oh, it's a version of Melissa while Dickie Betts is still playing in the band in the Allman Brothers, and Warren Haynes he was still very young, and they're playing the lead part at the end where they have the melodies, the two guitar melodies, one on top of the other, and because Dickie was, Dwayne's gone at that point in time, so Dickie was the residual. But he's just not the guitar player that Warren Haynes is. So when I'm sitting there, I see Warren. It almost looks like he's in a box, and he's a respectful guy, so he's not gonna he knows he's just happy to be playing in the Allman Brothers at that point. But he was so much better. I mean, when Dickie Betts left, and it was Warren Haynes on one side of the stage and Derek Trucks on the other side of the stage, that Allman Brothers was the best Allman Brothers band. I mean, fucking crazy, dude. Those guys are just they're a delight.
I mean, and I mentioned Gary Clark Jr. You mentioned Billy Strings and Derek Trucks. The guys that are playing like the Spanish.
Oh yeah,
shit.
It's like flamenco with jazz and a little classical, this and that. Yeah.
Those are the ones that are the most recent. I mean, I talked about Jack White, but other than that, everybody that we've talked about is at the fucking minimum 25 years or older. I mean, Jack White, kind of recent. But, we're talking Prince, Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck. You're talking about the Allman Brothers now. All of these people have been playing for a long time. A lot of them are fucking dead. And talk about people that have maybe disappeared, dude. There was that guy they called the Kid Johnny Lang and Kenny Wayne Shepherd. Those guys could play the guitar pretty well. and they're gone. And I don't know if that's because maybe they were parrots and they could only play whatever blues was put in front of them. I know Kenny Wayne Shepherd tried to write his own shit, but
Have you seen this girl, Her?
mm-mm.
Dude, she is. And you said Prince. You said you love Prince. Like I think she takes a ton of. She's very young. She's very new. When you said nobody knew, she is just stellar. I mean, like crazy fucking guitar player. And some of she's all over music. So not everything that she does when she performs is just about the guitar. But like when she picks up a guitar, dude, like and you know she it's not just straight shred. It's controlled. You know, it's what I you know it's is what what's the I said the Rolling Stones guy earlier.
Keith
Keith
Richards.
Richards. He said sometimes it's not the notes that you play; it's the ones that you don't. You know, I mean, sometimes it's when you shut up. You know, and you just and like she seems to like understand, and she's very young. She's born in '97, so
Well, it's hard. I mean, so I found that out when I wrote the book. You know, I did people's propaganda and I found that out. Right now we have so many fucking channels, and I don't mean on TV. I'm just talking about fucking media bombardment, right?
mhm.
That sometimes no matter how talented you are, you're not going to get heard.
Yeah, that's kind of the tragedy of the moment.
Whether it,
Yeah.
you know, whether we're talking about guitar or fucking saxophone, the piccolo, the fucking French horn, whatever, or your website, or fuck a podcast that you're doing. I mean, you might just end up being washed out and being overshadowed by a talentless fucking hack that has no idea what they're doing.
That's part of the reason why I use YouTube though, because that's something that, and of course there's an algorithm, right? But at the same time, my searches populate what drives it. You know, they're not going to steer me back in another direction. So like if I'm listening to something and then somebody else is listening to that and that something adjacent to it, then that's where my recommendations would come from at that point. So like there are places where you know you can generate space to find what's good or what's better, and of course like the I don't like there's all kinds of reasons why to criticize the YouTube algorithm, but art I don't think is generally speaking going to be one of
Well, YouTube is similar to Facebook and LinkedIn and other social media where they want to make money. So maybe her is paying for some sort of marketing. Um, there's still a chance she could get washed away. I understand what you're saying about searching for certain videos, but somewhere in their algorithm, they have it built in that she's only going to be able to show within her network a certain number of those people. And then, like, to where it pops up in their feed, right? And then it's going to also go further and say that, you know, this many people outside of the network are going to be able to see it without searching for it, like based on a recommendation. And then if you search specifically for her, then you can find it. But if you search for something like her playing guitar, then it's going to fucking flood you with 18 different videos of girls playing guitar because do you know what I'm saying?
no I'm not
Okay.
okay.
Well, fuck it. I don't want to talk about technology and how they're going to rip us off, but YouTube
Well,
is owned by Google.
their goal is to keep my attention though. So if they can if they can feed something in it that's going to keep my attention, that's their first and foremost goal.
Well, their goal is to monetize you.
That's my point.
Okay.
That's how they keep that you but you're making money off me by keeping me focused on it. So,
right.
So if I'm watching something, right? And I mean, I know you get what I was saying. Like if they're keeping this person's attention by having them watch Fish and you know, and
I do understand what you're saying. I'm just saying that it's not always going to pop up there just because of the similarities.
But if math bears out, and this girl's not going anywhere, this girl's going to be a monster. I mean, she already is. nominally a monster, but it's going to be because she's just that incredible musician all over the place, and that's by many other people's estimation other than my own. But that is one super solid female guitar player that I've seen.
So is she just recording on her own?
No, she's got a.
Okay, so she's got a record contract somehow. Okay, then that helps out with the YouTube thing also.
RCA was her first one. She's got a Grammy. Yeah, she's not going anywhere.
Yeah, if she won a Grammy, then she's not just somebody on YouTube. I was speaking specifically about somebody, and they've changed it now, but what's that fucking idiot Justin Bieber? Yeah. He ended up getting famous because he did a bunch of YouTube videos that, not that it's the same thing because it's a different type of art, but Dane Cook ended up getting famous because he did his shit on YouTube. Dane Cook, not a good comedian, but a lot of fucking idiots watched him on YouTube, so he ended up getting a fucking HBO special and whatever. Justin Bieber, in my opinion, not a fucking talented artist.
You don't have the fever? That would have had to been for me. He's like, it's like even funny to think about that because that's more than a decade ago.
Right, and now YouTube has tightened up their fucking algorithm and done all kinds of other stuff, and they have monetized everybody, dude. I mean, seriously, even if you're using an iPhone, you've been monetized by Google because they have so many other fingers on their glove.
I was never arguing, but we're not all. I mean, I understand how social media makes its money, so.
Well, I was just talking about the monster that is Google, not social media specifically. But yeah, we're good. We're on the same page. Ish. Yeah, ish. Fuck you, ish. Okay, so we're coming up on 45 minutes. Once again, nothing was ever decided, but I think we had a pretty solid conversation.
Yeah, well, there was something that was clearly decided. I have better taste in music than you have. That's obvious.
Yeah. Jam bands. Woo. I do want to mention just a couple of things because I feel like I always fucking leave the women out. And Joan Jett, she's a great fucking guitarist, and Lita Ford was too to some degree. And they were both in the Runaways. So maybe, and this might be something for another show, but I don't think I understand the difference between lead guitar and rhythm guitar because both of those girls couldn't have been lead guitar when they were in the Runaways. Nancy Wilson from Heart. And then, I talked about the Wrecking Crew, but Carol Kay plays guitar, and she's a fucking badass, and she's been on over like 50,000 albums because of the fact that she's a studio musician. Now, that's talent. I mean, to say that you've been on that many albums or that many songs,
probably good royalty checks.
Well, maybe. Probably not. It all depends on how they did the contract. Because like I said, that one dude from fucking Nine Inch Nails didn't get royalties, and that's why he left and started Filter. Yeah. I didn't say that on the show. We were talking about it earlier.
Since I said Derek Trucks, his wife Susan Tedeschi is a fucking monster, and she's a great songwriter.
Oh, as well. Tedeschi Trucks. Yeah. Fuck yeah, that's a solid band. Yeah, so there are a lot of women who can play the axe, and don't let anybody tell you any different, even though all we did was talk about dudes for 45 minutes. My apologies to the females out there.
The sausage fest.
So, I think next time on Friday, we're going to talk about narcissism.
Which doesn't mean that I'm just going to talk about myself and Brian's just going to talk about himself and we're going to arm wrestle. No,
not at all. I think we're going to talk about it in the bigger picture because, there are everybody's a narcissist, but not everybody has narcissistic personality disorder. So
people are using that word really weird today. So might be something worth meditating on a little.
Yeah. So next episode, narcissism. Thanks again for joining us. Twitter, short bus debate. TikTok, short bus debate club.
Phone call 720-334.
Roll.
All right.
Talk to you later.
Later.